Hello and welcome to Comically Incompetent. My name is Doug, and this week you guys might have noticed there is no Ben. Ben is going to be taking a short hiatus from the podcast. He will be back, do not worry. But in the meantime, while he's gone, we're going to do something that, everyone in the world has started a podcast, and everyone in the world has also done a Marvel movie in review. So keeping with our trends, we're going to do another Marvel movie in review, and each week we're going to have a different guest, another one of my friends. So this week we have one of my best friends, my college roommate, Dominic. Now, Dominic, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Doug. So, like you said, I was your college roommate. I'm going to grad school for visual effects, and I love this movie. I'm glad I can talk about it with you.
Yeah, it'd be good to have the visual effects aspect of it, especially because this one, we just watched it. This movie is it's not old. I wouldn't say old, but it still looks really good from a visual effect aspect.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I think it was one of the first movies to really do the whole HUD animations. Like when he gets in the suit and you see all the graphics around him.
Oh, that's the coolest stuff. I remember as a kid being mind blown by that.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember learning about it in school, professors talking about this is how you do it and blah, blah, blah. It's pretty cool.
How do they do that?
It's a lot of tracking in After Effects and a lot of compositing and constructing different 3D effects. You can go pretty deep into it. But.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I noticed that I never actually noticed before was, and we'll get to this part in the movie, we're kind of going to talk through the movie as this, in the chronological of the movie. Does that make sense? Yeah. Is when he's first using when he's watching the news, everything going on in the Middle East, and he starts to use the pulse thing on his hand, is you can actually see it. I didn't realize go from his chest through the wiring to the hand.
Oh, I didn't notice that actually. Wow.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. They did such a good job, even the little details on this. Which I thought was really cool.
There's so many intricate details, especially when he's constructing the suit. You can see all the little wires sparking and everything.
Yeah, and it's surprisingly still holds up. Because there's movies that came out even 5 years ago that don't even hold up now, but this movie was 12 years ago and it still looks damn good.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of future proofing that they did, and just they played it not safe, but they were smart with the effects that they did, and that they wouldn't really age that badly.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is a lot of people thank Disney for that, but this was before Disney bought Marvel.
Oh yeah, it is. I didn't think about that.
So this was Marvel's first solo produced film, but it was distributed by Paramount.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that I feel like Disney didn't have a hand in this one, even though this setup is going to be Disney's probably, in my opinion, biggest franchise.
Yep, if it isn't already.
Yeah. This was groundbreaking. I remember when this movie first came out in 2008, my mom took me to see it because Robert Downey Jr. was in it, and he was just coming out of rehab. This was his big time, his big premiere coming out of his problematic past, and even she loved it, and she doesn't like superhero movies.
Yeah. I recently rewatched it, and I made a note of that, and I looked at his past, and really he got out of that big slump right before this movie kicked off. That's pretty amazing timing.
Yeah, this was a huge risk. If you watch the behind the scenes stuff, Jon Favreau talks about how he had to fight to get Robert Downey Jr. to even come in for an audition because Marvel did not want him because they thought he was going to be too problematic, too big an issue. But
yeah,
he became probably one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest star in the world, because of this movie.
Yeah, seriously. He is Iron Man at this point.
Yeah, there's no one you could recast. You couldn't do this again with another actor and Iron Man, at least not for as long as we're alive.
Yeah.
But this movie is, I think the thing that appeals to everyone about this movie, what got non-comic book fans into it, was that it was the only one to start off with a human story. You followed Tony Stark, not Iron Man, for the first 45 minutes.
Yeah. That's one thing that I was noticing, is that it's such a grounded movie. It doesn't really feel super comic booky. You know what I mean? Like throughout the entire movie, it feels real. I don't know how to describe it. It just feels like it's grounded in reality.
Yeah, I think the only other movie for me that did that, switching over to DC, was Christopher Nolan's Batman movies.
Yeah, definitely. It feels, referring to the Batman movies, they felt like a crime detective story before they were a superhero story.
Yeah, definitely. And they did such a good job on that Iron Man that it pulled in such bigger crowds than got people into comics and these comic book stories. And I think, like you said, it's so grounded that, and this actually ties into our beer this week. I forgot to mention, we're doing a beer called Sense of Purpose from Green Cheek, which I'll get into later. But this whole movie is basically him finding a sense of purpose in the world, finding out that, building these weapons isn't his purpose. It's saving people. It's his purpose. I thought that was super interesting to kind of see more as an adult, because in 2008 I was like 12.
Yeah, I was gonna say 2008 was a really sensitive time with the whole weapons market and everything. I mean, the Iraq War was relatively dying down, and it was just a kind of a touchy subject that they really pressed on.
Yeah, I mean, they faced it head on, having a good chunk of the movie take place in the Middle East.
Yep. Yeah. And you got to see the destruction that his own creation was causing. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, and I think that the first scene is a good example when he's in the Humvee and it first gets attacked, because, I mean, that famous shot of he's sitting behind the rock and then the missile comes in and lands and it says Stark Industries on the side, and that's what initially is like initially put the shrapnel in his chest where he needs that arc reactor piece.
Yep, and then he has that memory implanted in his brain forever. Pretty
yes.
Beautiful imagery right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something you see in a lot of comic book movies, because up until now, we'd pretty much had, Fantastic Four with Jessica Alba. We'd had Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, which is a whole nother episode I think you and I should talk about.
Oh, definitely. I think the whole trilogy was before this movie.
Yeah, I think it was. I think the last one came out, like a year or two before this one?
Yeah, I think it was a year before.
Yeah, and we hadn't had a lot of, or really any, well, I know some people beg to differ on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but really not many groundbreaking superhero movies up until
really.
Now. I mean, I gotta admit that I was not the biggest fan of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies except for 2. 2 was a good movie.
I loved them. I love the first 2. The third one barely exists to me, but
I remember, just on a side tangent, that third one, I loved it as a kid, because it was all these different superheroes and like supervillains and explosions, and that was fun.
Yeah.
And then I went back and watched it as an adult, and I was like, wow, this does not hold up.
No. You see all the little plot holes, and you just can't get around them. Yeah.
Yeah, and Topher Grace, just his face in that movie.
Oh, Topher.
But yeah, and Iron Man, then next, so he sees his missile, that whole imagery. Then we move into the past 36 hours, I think it is, before he's attacked in the Humvee.
Yeah, and he's testing off the missile, right?
Yeah, so he's showing off the Jericho missile, and I thought that was interesting, because I feel like that kind of idea of, like, we start the movie and then we go back to, like, see how we got here, that whole imagery, I feel like had been, maybe not, I guess, in 2008, but felt to me, like, overdone.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It didn't feel too bad. Like, I remember when I was first watching, it didn't feel too jarring, but it definitely felt like I'd been in that situation plot-wise before. Yeah,
like, I feel like watching it now, I feel like they could have just gotten rid of that whole thing and just started out with that, like, 36 hours earlier where he's in Vegas, and we get to that point, because it kind of felt like it made the beginning feel a lot longer to me than it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I remember, it feels like a long movie. It's only, barely 2 hours, but I remember sitting there, like, going, wow, there's so much movie left, and we're only, like, 45 minutes to an hour in.
Yeah, there was one thing that probably added to that. There was so much world building in this movie. I mean, they touched on so many different parts of Tony Stark and his dad and the whole industry and where the world is at the moment, and it took a little while, or it feels like it takes a little while to really get into the story. Yeah,
which we were talking about how good the CGI is, but the movie does date itself in some parts, like his what's that phone call that he has where he, like, the sidekick, or no, it's not the sidekick, but where he, like, flips the screen up and then to reveal the buttons when he's talking to Obadiah Stane.
Oh, yeah, the flip phone. Yeah.
Like, that was like screen. A high-end phone.
Yep. Yeah, it was.
Like, I remember I wanted that phone so badly, but it was at the time like so expensive.
Yeah. They got video call on it somehow in the movie.
Which I don't think that could video call at the time. I could be wrong, but
Probably not. I don't know about that one.
yeah, it does play dates itself a little bit. But and then we go because we're kind of jumping back and forth at this point in the movie, and so then we see him in Vegas, we see him get on the plane, go over, we see him introducing the Jericho missile, which is leading up to the attack, and then we get into the cave with, I think, without this character, there would be no MCU, which this is where he meets Jensen.
Yeah. I forgot his name. That's good you remembered his name. But
yeah, I mean, there is no MCU, there is no Tony Stark character arc without starting out with Jensen teaching him what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, his last words to Tony really pushed him to go in that direction. Do you remember his last words?
It was "Don't waste your life."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that now in an age where we've seen Avengers Endgame, like that hits deeper now.
Yeah, it does. It does definitely. I won't get into that. But
Yeah, I think we can comfortably say spoilers because I think the movie's been out for over a year now. But if you want to talk about that, but it's just that a lot of points in this movie hit a lot deeper now, having seen where it ends and like where his arc begins to where it ends. Now a lot of like the stuff in the beginning definitely means I feel like so much more.
Definitely, and it's crazy to think that this is the movie that started everything. Like started this whole what do they call it? The Infinity Saga.
Yeah, and not even that. This introduced and changed the way I feel like movies are made now because it started introducing what a big franchise could be.
Yeah.
I mean, without this movie, there is no. I mean, obviously no MCU, but there's no people making these movies that are sagas and these series that are sagas.
Yeah, these great overarching stories that pass over many years.
Yeah, this was the first to do anything like that, and still like hold its own very well. That each movie, which I'll get into with different guests in future episodes, and hopefully Don, you'll be back for a future one.
Oh yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, we see like Tony Stark especially. This is just where he began, and to see where he ends is fantastic. And Jensen introduced him so much to the idea of like showing him that these were his customers, not what he thought of like these American soldiers. It was these terrorists that were his customers for Stark Industries.
Yeah, and it really showed that his company wasn't really trying to push one side into global peace or global whatever you want to call it. It was just ensuring this global chaos that would last forever, making the shareholders billions and millions.
Yeah, which we see when he gets back and he says that he's going to stop making what's the weapons manufacturing. He's going to shut down the Stark Industries weapons side, and our villain Obadiah Stane is basically trying to fight him on that every step of the way. Which I thought, I mean, Iron Man was not a well-known comic book hero. I feel like even to some comic book fans.
Mm-hmm.
And Ironmonger was really, I felt like, out of left field. This movie was a big risk that way, because I feel like you had big comic book heroes. A lot of people knew Captain America, whether you read comics or not. But I doubt anyone knew really a lot about Iron Man or even anything about the Ironmonger.
Yeah, I mean, Iron Man wasn't ever, as far as I know, he was never really a propaganda piece like Captain America was. So he wouldn't be as widely known. I don't think so. Did they ever say Ironmonger in the movie? I don't remember.
Yeah, so in our next scene, after he announces that, him and Obadiah meet up at the arc reactor, and Obadiah's like, come on, what are you doing? We're ironmongers.
Oh, he did say that. You're right.
That's the only time he says it was that one scene. And then, well, Ben and I have talked about this. They never really, there's a lot of heroes that, like, you don't ever hear, like, their name. Like, I don't think Killmonger is ever really called Killmonger. Like, they say, like, codename Killmonger, and that's it.
Yeah, they mentioned it once. I remember they say the word once. But yeah,
or in Ant-Man, he's not the Yellow Jacket. He's wearing a suit that they mention, like, oh, this suit's called the Yellow Jacket. Like, he's never the Yellow Jacket. Like, stuff like that. Like, they definitely did that. But
Yeah, that seems like the modern, little bit tongue-in-cheek way to appease the comic book fans while also kind of staying a little bit more in reality.
Yeah, because I feel like if you're not a comic book fan, you go to the movie for this, like the action. Then if he ever was like, if he was in the suit at the end of the movie and went, "I am the Ironmonger," I feel like you'd lose a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's definitely a nice nod for the comic book fans to him say, "We're Ironmongers," and then they can all laugh to themselves and be excited. But you don't lose any like outside of that world audience. Which then, where do we go from there? What's the next scene again? It's so the arc reactor.
Yeah, they're talking about Obadiah doesn't want them to shut down the weapons production. We don't, as the audience, we don't know why yet, but I mean,
yeah,
know why. And then after that,
I think that's when we move into him going back to start rebuilding his like the Mach 2 Iron Man suit.
Yeah, he starts all of his experiments. And that was a really fun part of the movie, that whole montage of him creating it.
Yeah, and I love the little robot, not the little robot, but the robot that he has that is basically just an idiot.
Yeah, with the fire extinguisher.
Yeah, he keeps having to treat that robot like a child. That's always, yeah, that scene is also just, again, I mean, from a visual effects perspective, him flying, that looked really good. There wasn't any sense of like he's obviously on wires or anything. Like it looked like he was actually being held up by the jets on his feet.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that. They did a very good job, and it's very easy to get lost in it, even as someone who knows how they did it.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that. Also, like, because he's trying to learn to fly. Then we see him on his first flight come out of the house, like a house in Malibu, and go up, and that's when we first have the icing problem. But seeing him fly the way that we know now, like his feet together and his hands by his sides with his hands out, like what became just like Iron Man flying was like seeing it for the first time, him kind of figuring out that's how they do it.
Yeah, that was definitely an iconic moment. And right before that, he was floundering everywhere trying to get his bearings, and then he strikes that pose, and everyone in the audience just, he's doing it.
Yeah, he strikes the pose, and he's like, you see him stabilize, like he figured it out.
Yep.
And that's when we hear, I think one of my favorite pieces of music from the MCU was that dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun. I was like, it's just, I feel like that there's not many in the MCU like music cues that I feel like really hit, besides like obviously like the Avengers theme. But outside that, I couldn't think of like a Captain America theme song besides like Star Spangled Banner, like a Thor theme song. Like, Iron Man is like one of the few that really have that like theme that you think of Iron Man when you hear it. Yeah,
you're right. There aren't very many like anthems that I can remember besides like Iron Man, the Avengers, and Spider-Man, but that's not in the MCU.
Yeah, maybe Black Panther. But that's more Kendrick Lamar's album was just absolutely perfect.
Oh, definitely. All the drums they used were very iconic.
Yeah, that had such an iconic sound, which I always thought was interesting that when we see him in Civil War, because obviously Civil War is before the Black Panther movie, they have like those like African like do sounds whenever he enters like the scene.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because it felt out of place in Civil War, but then because we didn't really know the world that was built around him yet. But yeah, I mean, besides that, like Iron Man is really the only one that I think has like a real theme to him besides Black Panther that we see in the MCU. Because you're right, like, Spider-Man obviously has his famous Spider-Man theme, but we don't see that in the MCU.
Yeah, no. Does Iron Man's theme persist into the later movies? I didn't really
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think it does. I don't remember though.
I don't even know if it goes all the way through to Iron Man 2. I'm sure it does, but
probably, yeah.
Yeah, so then the next scene we have is his famous the icing problem, where he tries to go high up, and obviously it doesn't work for him. Which foreshadowing to how he almost takes out the Ironmonger.
Yep. Yeah, his own cockiness. Can I say that word? That word's fine.
Yeah, just don't say just cockiness.
I guess now it's not fine since I mentioned it.
You can curse. It's okay. I'll bleep it out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, his own cockiness led him into that situation, like it does in pretty much the entire movie. He's doing, hey, I'm going to do what I want to do, and hopefully it'll work out. Yeah,
which, I mean, that's really just Iron Man. That's basically the epitome of that character. That's one thing that doesn't go away, is he's going to do what he thinks is best.
Yeah, it doesn't go away for a while, like a long while.
I don't even think it really does. I feel like it stays with him. I think he learns to use that for better or for good.
Yeah, yeah.
But obviously, we see it for worse in Age of Ultron.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what causes the entire movie, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so we had the icing problem, and then right after that, he blows a hole through his building.
Yeah, he tries to land on the roof and blows a hole, or lands straight through the roof and the living room.
Yeah.
Which I think then we see the next big scene after that. We have some stuff in the middle, but I think the next big scene that I think is important to talk about is when he goes to the Middle East and goes and like the first real run of his suit.
Yeah, well, he goes there because in the beginning, Jensen mentioned these from a small town named Golmira, and then he in one of the scenes he's at a party, and the reporter mentions that Golmira is under attack, and she shows him some pictures, and they're pictures of his weapons being used on Golmira. So that's what really lights the fire under him to go out and do it on his own.
Yeah, and that's also in that same scene with the reporters when he finds out that Obadiah Stane is selling to these people under the table.
Yeah, exactly.
But even that far into the movie, we still don't really know as an audience that he's the Ironmonger yet.
No, I never guessed it when I saw it for the first time until later on. I was like, oh, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, like it adds up, but they don't really tell you at all, or don't even really allude to it that much.
No, not really. But yeah, he flies off to the Middle East, and in probably my favorite part of the movie, most badass part, when he does a superhero landing in the middle of the village.
Ah, that's so cool.
And blows some terrorists away. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that was just that superhero landing, everything about that scene, like from him using that one thing on his shoulder to take out the bad guys that were basically using the hostages as shields.
Oh yeah, the little darts that he fires out.
Yeah, and like targets the bad guys.
Oh.
Or the famous one where I feel like they use that shot a lot of him shooting that tiny little thing, the missile, then walking away as a massive tank explodes.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was even used in imagery to promote like Endgame.
Yep. Yeah, it was. I remember seeing that on like visual effects posters, like advertising, for a company or not a company, but like certain types of work. And that specific shot was shown a couple of times, which is pretty cool.
What about it would make it something that because I feel like there's a lot, at least personally, someone who doesn't know visual effects, there's a lot more shots I think that use a lot more visual effects. What about that do you think is like the one that people are like, this is the visual effects? Is it the explosion or? I
mean, part of it was probably just the rhythm of the movie that was happening at the moment. That it's just a scene that's ingrained in people's minds, and but also if you pay attention in that scene, there's so much detail and all the rubble around when he climbs out of that crater. And like the explosion, you can see all the different pieces flying in different directions, and it's very intricate.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, obviously that all that stuff wasn't there in the shot, and even the use of like the depth, having the tank just looks so much super far back.
Yeah,
like the composition of the shot and the special effects and everything, just everything worked so well with that shot. And you're right, it's just an iconic scene in the movie. That's what I think the first time we have Iron Man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you see him walking away and not looking at the explosion. Okay, this is our hero. This is him.
Yeah, because we see him, obviously, in the suit a few times, and then there's the iconic shot of... I think the other moment, the only moment before this that I would think is, you see him for Iron Man is when he's in the cave, and they use this in Endgame in the credits, too, when he's hammering the helmet.
Oh, yeah.
Dun-na-na-na, dun-na-na-na, and he's just
goes in line. Metal. Goes in line with the music, too. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, those are, I think, the two most iconic scenes that lasted all these years, is those two shots of him walking away from the tank and him creating the helmet.
Yep. Yeah. One thing I noticed in this movie is there's a lot of open violence in this movie.
I noticed that too.
If you look at the later MCU movies, they do a lot of like they try to make things look non-lethal. Like he'll shoot the repulsors from his hands that might knock people down or something. But in this movie, he's like killing people all the time.
Yeah, and a lot of people are also being killed like up front on screen. Now they didn't do blood, but like even in the shot in the beginning in the Humvee, like when the soldiers around him get out of the car, they're shot like right in front of you.
Yeah.
Now like there's no blood splatter, but they're still shot like right in front of you.
Yeah, there's one shot where right before he does a superhero landing in the village, there's some like family that runs in a building, and then you just see a bunch of bullets going into the building. Like, geez, what movie am I watching right now?
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, it was before everything. I mean, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of that came because they weren't owned by Disney yet.
Yeah, that's I didn't want to say that, but that was probably it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Disney, as good of a job as they did in the future of this series, I think that was definitely one thing, is that this one was a lot more, I wouldn't say more violent, but more graphic.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Graphic.
Yeah, even the shot, I think, also we skipped over this, but there's a shot of Pepper Potts sticking her hand into his chest.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that part.
Yeah, which is something we never saw again. We saw nothing like that and again.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like it was kind of disturbing. It's uncomfortable.
It's technically gore, I guess. Because they're pulling something out of his chest, and there's, like, fluid dripping off and everything, and...
Yeah, which I do not know the scientific word he used to describe that fluid, but she was like, "Oh, it's pus."
Yeah. One thing I wanted to note was their chemistry that they had. RDJ and Gwyneth Paltrow, and just the characters. They had such a good chemistry going on in not just this movie, but the movies down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she was a great Pepper Potts.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, obviously, from this movie, like, just them not dating, you could see the chemistry, you're right, all the way up until that last scene in Endgame where she's like, "You can rest now." That whole arc, even just for them, because that relationship came a long way throughout the series, from separating in Civil War, they weren't together, to being back together, to then being married, to then having a kid, like...
Yeah.
They came a long way, too.
I forgot they separated in Civil War, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like a full like broken up, but they were definitely like he tells Cap like, "Oh, she left she's like living somewhere else or something."
Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, the chemistry between them. Yeah, they did such a good job casting. I mean, and then Terrence Howard as Rhodey, I think, was the only like, I don't know. A lot of people have different like views on Terrence Howard versus Don Cheadle as Rhodey. I personally prefer Don Cheadle.
Same. I like Terrence Howard, but I can't see him doing the things that were done later on in the other movies.
Yeah, Terrence Howard didn't seem like a hero. Like, he was like the War Machine hero. Like, he was very pro what Tony Stark was.
Yeah.
He wasn't pro... Like, I feel like Don Cheadle's character was a lot more like working towards peace and less explosions from... Like, and less arms selling and all that stuff. He was more a fan of what Tony was becoming, whereas this one didn't want him to change.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's even a line in the movie when Tony Stark goes up to Rhodey at the Air Force Base. He wants to tell Rhodey, "Hey, like, I'm working on this new project," and Rhodey stops him, like, "Hey, you need to think about where your priorities are at." So,
yeah, it didn't fit with, like, I feel like the character that we ended up getting through Don Cheadle.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I think Terrence Howard's a great actor. I liked him a lot, but I'm glad we got Don Cheadle.
Yeah, I agree. I have a confession. Every time I watch this movie, I always think it's Cuba Gooding Jr. And I always have to look it up and like, oh, that's Terrence Howard.
They do. I could see similarities for them, definitely.
Yeah.
I could definitely see similarities. Cuba Gooding Jr. would actually not have been too bad of a cast either.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah.
I think the really interesting thing between them was I think Don Cheadle is not a lot, but like a fair bit older than Terrence Howard.
Yeah.
I think.
That was the only like jarring change, I guess, between the movies was their age and it being a different person. But
yeah,
that was the biggest difference, I guess.
Yeah, which then we had that famous, I feel like it was famous, but then obviously changed the actor, was a shot of Terrence Howard as Rhodey going like, "Next time, baby," when he sees the silver suit.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, leading into he's gonna be the War Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of like aspects of this movie that I feel like were, as someone who didn't know anything about Iron Man going into it the first time, were really cool to see it kind of pan out. Like seeing Rhodey become War Machine, it was alluded to. I know that there are comic book fans out there who saw that scene and went, "Oh, he's gonna be War Machine. They're gonna do War Machine."
Yeah.
But I was just like, "Okay, cool. He's gonna get a suit." I had no idea what that meant for the character.
Yeah, same. I had no idea. I didn't really ever read comic books in my life, but yeah.
Yeah, I read only really X-Men, so I don't have any frame of reference outside of really X-Men. They did such a good job on this series that it made a lot of people go back and read those comics, and now like they understand Rhodey as the War Machine, or even Obadiah Stane as Ironmonger. Because like you and I were both saying, if you don't know that he's the Ironmonger, then you don't even really know to the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like going back and looking at the lore of the universe, I guess it really enriches the experience of watching the movie, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think a lot of this movie really gets spoiled in the first like 10 minutes if you know who these characters are. Because I feel like they really banked on people not knowing.
Yeah.
Because you meet Obadiah Stane in the first 20 minutes of the movie, and if you read the comics and you know he's the Ironmonger, then any semblance of a twist that comes an hour and a half later is just ruined.
Yeah, I mean, is it the same for any comic book movie if you already know the characters?
I mean, kind of. There was a time when you and I were in college, and I was going to see the trailer for Winter Soldier just come out, and I had read some comics. I knew the Winter Soldier was Bucky Barnes, and I was hanging out with these people, and they were like, "Oh, I'm so excited! I want to find out who the Winter Soldier is." And I was like, "It's Bucky Barnes," and they're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And I was like, I couldn't believe I just completely spoiled the movie for them. I just was like, but I knew, but it didn't ruin the movie, I think, because like for me, that twist was still cool. Like still seeing what's his name, Sebastian Stan, like take off the mask and figuring it out was still fun to watch, even though I already knew that it was gonna be Bucky.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of accidentally skipped that movie when I was watching all the MCU movies. And so I watched it recently, and I knew it was him, from the get-go, and it was still awesome.
That was the first movie I liked Captain America in as a character.
Yeah, he really I don't even know how to describe it. He turned into something else than I thought he was before.
Yeah. And which, when we get to the Captain America episode, we're going to have another one of our friends, our other roommate, Grayson, who's going to be on the show. And he is, we're going to get a different perspective. He's not exactly a Captain America fan, to say the least. He's not a fan. But as far as this movie goes, I mean, then we move on to when that really tense scene when Pepper Potts is in Tony Stark's office getting the information, when Tony finds out and is trying to get the info about Obadiah selling under the table.
Yeah, and then she discovers his secret project.
Yeah, which is around the same time I think we have the shots of Obadiah meeting with the guy who is leading the 10 Rings.
Yep.
And he uses that tech where it like paralyzes him for like 15 minutes, which is also disturbing the way they did it, like the veins and stuff.
Yeah, that specific piece of tech scares me, because that's something that could really exist like right now.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, that's true. That was one of the few things in, I feel like, the MCU that you're like, that could be real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a intense like few scenes there, like very tense, like Obadiah trying, like we finally see what he's up to, and then Pepper Potts trying to get the information out to Tony.
Yeah, now that you know all his dastardly deeds. And then he walks in the room while she's doing all this.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Bridges as Obadiah killed it.
Oh,
I mean, that dude, he was freaky. He was, like, he did such a good job of being, like, that creepy, obviously dark in some way, but you don't really know how. Like, he did a mysterious character very well.
Yeah, he felt very relatable, though, as some scummy politician or businessman.
Yeah, like, he was very believable as a character. Like, there's not a second where he went, it's just Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Which, he did such a good job. Which he's a good. I mean, Big Lebowski's one of my favorites. Then it just shows his range. We can play the dude and then Obadiah Stane.
Yeah, two very different people.
Yeah, which he delivers probably my favorite line in the MCU. Which I'm gonna move back from Mike so I can yell it. When he goes, Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Well, I'm not Tony Stark.
I just love that scene so much. I don't know what it is about it, but it makes me laugh every single time.
It's so great. You can see the frustration on his face and this poor man that's doing the best he can.
Who then we see again at the end of the MCU in Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah, that was so cool. Yeah.
That was, I think, that has to be one of the longest, like, reprising of a roles in, I'm not going to say movie history, but probably movie history, but that was like, what, 12 years in between his two roles as the scientist, unnamed scientist number 1 in Iron Man to a villain in Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how far ahead they knew he was going to do that. Obviously not by Iron Man. They had no idea what was happening around then. But
yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming like at some point in pre-production they're writing Far From Home and they're like, what if we got this guy back?
Yeah, and they got a bunch of people too. They got people from other movies. I don't remember any of them, but I just remember the scientist guy.
Yeah, I only remembered him because I love that scene in Iron Man where he yells at him and he's like, well, I'm not Tony Stark. It's just such a, I don't know, I found it more funny than anything else, but it was supposed to be a very tense moment.
I mean, it was kind of both at the same time. You could see the humor in the situation when this just billionaire genius is stomping on these two normal people.
Yeah, which, yeah, you're right. It just shows, I think, Tony Stark's intelligence of that. These guys, like, it can't even be thought of. Like, it's not even possible to even, like, comprehend, but Tony Stark did it literally in a cave with a box of scraps. Which, then we move to, I think, the climax of the movie, the big fight between, we find out that Obadiah Stane had an Iron Man, quote-unquote, Ironmonger suit the whole time. Well, not the whole time. And we have the big fight, which I think, I mean, watching it, there was definitely some moments where the CGI was a little, they were working on it. It's 12 years ago. It looked 12 years old, but there are a lot of moments where I'm like, wow, that still would look good if I saw that in a movie today.
Yeah, there were definitely moments where you're like, okay, yeah, that's CGI. But they never went too big, is what I liked.
Yeah.
They never like, oh, he's taking down a building or something. They just had a fight in a street, and then they were in the air, and then they were on a roof. That was pretty much it. Yeah,
which something that I know you and I have talked about in the past is how they never really figured out how to do it where Iron Man's suit is CGI'd, but he doesn't have the helmet on.
Yeah,
like around the neck. And you see that, I think, when Obadiah opens up his suit and he's in there, but they didn't really get that he's in, like, the CGI that he's in a fake suit didn't really work.
Yeah.
Even all the way through to the end of the series.
Yeah, it's... I am definitely not a proponent of, like, the push a button and then your helmet disappears effects.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some movies where it doesn't look as good as others. This one looked okay. I think in Civil War it was very noticeable, if I remember right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was thinking the same one. But I think also this is the only time they used a practical suit for Iron Man.
Really? This is the only time?
Yeah, besides that, they had, in later movies when they didn't have the full CGI suit yet, they have him in like almost, it looked like football padding, but designed to look like the Iron Man, like, chest piece. And then they put the rest of, like, his legs and arms and stuff in CGI, but this was the only one that I think they had a full, in some scenes, like, full suit for him.
Huh. Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that. That's cool, though.
Yeah, I know. They did a good job on it. And then this is the scene where he has to blow up the arc, well, he has to have Pepper blow up the arc reactor.
Yeah. Oh, wait,
which
we're forgetting one character.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
A certain agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, you're right. Agent Coulson's first appearance.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to mark that down for this.
I forgot he was in this movie.
Yeah, of the Strategic Homeland Intervention something Logistics Division.
Yeah, you should really shorten that down.
Yeah, the introduction of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Coulson. Which he's just fantastic.
It's cool rewatching the movie and understanding how, like, important of a character and like organization he is. Because I remember when I first watched the movie, it was just like, okay, this is something we're just gonna throw it away. But,
Yeah. Well, because I think he was, besides he had like a name, but he was pretty much, in as far as that movie goes, unnamed agent.
yeah, that he could have just been unnamed. Yeah.
Yeah, like he mostly follows him around and goes like, "We'd like to set up a time to speak with you," and that's pretty much all he does the whole movie until the very end.
Yeah, and then they help Pepper get into the lab. That's pretty much it.
Which then we have some Shield agents, which are we never see again, because then we get some different Shield agents for the later movies.
Yeah, no, they get obliterated by Stain.
Yeah, which is a very intense scene, which is a very well done scene too, of him like hiding in the darkness, and then like even in his massive suit.
I remember it being pretty creepy when I saw it in theaters. But
they did such a good job on that.
Yeah, but anyway, we're on the roof.
Yeah, which I think one of my only plot holes. I have a couple I'll talk about, but my only really big plot hole is Iron Man was closer to the arc reactor explosion than Obadiah was. Both their suits were open because Iron Man's had been ripped apart. Why was he not hurt by the explosion, but Obadiah was?
The only explanation I could see is because Iron Man was so much lighter and he was directly in the path. He was hit by the force and, like, ejected out like 20 feet or whatever. Yeah. And Obadiah got hit by all the electricity, I guess, if you want to call it. And because his suit is so much bigger, he was a lot more stable, so he couldn't get thrown back. So then he just got shocked to death.
Okay.
That's what I thought happened.
Yeah, that can make more sense. Which then he falls straight into the arc reactor with massive explosion. And that pretty much wraps up the movie until we get to the end scene with I think the first and last line, the first major line that Tony Stark iterates, and his last line ever.
Ooh, the scene that made a generation.
I would, definitely agree. He's at the press conference. He has the cards, but he says, I'm going to let you say it. I'm going to give you the honor of saying it.
I am Iron Man.
Ah, it's so good. Which then we have just like the amazing music, everything hits, and like the credits start rolling, and that pretty much wraps up the first Iron Man movie. Which I think, yeah, you're right, just a movie and a scene of a generation created. That scene just, I think it had a bigger importance than I feel like a lot of people think too. Of that was Marvel basically saying, we're not going to have secret identities. We're not going to have him running around trying to hide that he's Tony Stark. We're not going to have any of that nonsense. He's just going to be Iron Man. And besides Spider-Man, there are no hidden identities in the MCU. Thor is Thor. Captain America is Captain America. He's Steve Rogers the whole way through.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I mean, even Ant-Man is known. Everyone knows his name.
They knew both Ant-Man. I mean, the whole thing was that it was Hank Pym, but everyone's like, it's Hank Pym. And he's like, no, it wasn't me. But everyone's like, it was you. And it was the same with Scott Lang. They're like, he's Ant-Man. He's like, yeah, I'm Ant-Man. And yeah, I mean, just the importance of this movie for what came later, and not just the MCU, but just in film and superhero movies. I mean, because of this movie, we had the DCEU try and fail to do this again.
They just tried to rush it. That was the problem. If they just would have taken their time, they could have had the same thing. But
yeah, which I know you are a huge fan of the Man of Steel movie, and if they would have just kept going like that. Like, yeah, the Man of Steel, it was a good movie. It wasn't exactly perfect, but they would have just built on it. Like, they could have had something so cool, but they decided to skip straight to Batman vs. Superman and the Justice League.
Yep, exactly. And I can't even explain why I like Man of Steel. I've seen it too many times.
That was one of the movies that would come back into the dorm, and you're like, I've watched it every day for a week. Sometimes twice a day.
It's not my favorite movie. I've just seen it so many times. It's just, I don't know. There's something about it. Hits me right in cerebellum.
That's how I was for the first Avengers. There was something like, because that was before Marvel, as like the MCU was like what it became as far as popularity. Like the first Avengers is still like a bit like a famous hit, but not as big as the rest of them were. And I was probably the only person I knew that would continuously just watch the Avengers over and over again. Because I know it's just an X-Men fan, but being a comic book fan, seeing superheroes on the big screen was the absolute coolest thing like that. In a crossover, building up to that was so cool.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I guess as a kid, I was more of a DC fan just because of, Justice League and Teen Titans and all that.
Yeah.
But just seeing any superhero that I knew on screen was amazing.
Yeah, which I feel like this is a good example of. I have this theory that I feel like DC does villains better and Marvel does heroes better. Because I think Ironmonger, as good of an actor as Jeff Bridges was, he was a great Obadiah Stane as like an evil businessman, but I feel like the Ironmonger isn't such a good villain. I feel like and Marvel falls apart not falls apart, but just struggles when it comes to villains. Besides Thanos, and I feel like DC does villains so well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They Marvel tends to throw away their villains pretty easily.
Yeah,
and
okay.
And how do I say this? DC's villains, they just feel like people. Like I don't know. A lot of times they just feel like another person who has another viewpoint, like Zod in Man of Steel.
Yeah, because I think what makes a good villain is that you can, you know, their point of view is flawed, but you can see where they're coming from. And besides Thanos, there was no villain in the Marvel that did that. But you can see, like, you can almost see Heath Ledger as the Joker. You can kind of see where he's coming from. It's insane, and you know it's wrong, but you can still kind of see it.
Yep, exactly.
Or even, like, I haven't seen it in a long time, but, I mean, I remember feeling the same way, but, like, Zod. Like, he's flawed, and he's messed up, and something's wrong with him. But you kind of see where he's coming from.
Yeah, I love Zod.
He was a good villain. Like I said, like DC, they did such a good job on him. He was a good, and Michael Shannon's just a great actor too.
Yeah, I was gonna say Michael Shannon is amazing in whatever you put him in.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and I think, as Iron Man goes, I mean, I feel like this was one of the best ones of Marvel 20-something movies. This was one of the best ones. To set up the universe, the cultural importance this had, it began something so much bigger than itself, but was still such a big part of it. Like, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to talk about our beer this week real quick, and then I think you and I are going to have to do some comically ratings.
Oh, boy.
So, our beer this week is Sense of Purpose by Green Cheek Beer. We've had Green Cheek on several times because they're amazing. There's no bad beer that comes out of Green Cheek. And Sense of Purpose is an Italian-style Pilsner with a 5.1% alcohol, which is our lowest percentage of alcohol we've had on this show, which I know, Dom, it's upsetting.
Yeah, I tend to go a little higher on my beers, but I mean, if it tastes good, it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a really good beer, but usually ours range from like 8 to 12, but this is still, I mean, really good. It's an Italian-style Pilsner, like I said. It's they made a big deal. It's vegan, which I've never seen a beer advertised as vegan, and I would not have guessed if I hadn't have read about it that it was vegan.
Interesting. What?
Yeah, it's really good.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah, I'll save you a can.
Oh, definitely.
I'll have to give that to you next time I see you after this whole quarantine thing is over. So, Green Cheek, we've said it before, they have two locations in Orange, which is in Orange County, California, and in Costa Mesa in Orange County, California. So I would definitely check them out. Both locations are still open. Costa Mesa is actually open for dine-in now, which is interesting to me, but you can also still pick up and go. And Orange is still a drive-through. So if you guys live in SoCal, I'd definitely check them out. If you live in Orange County, it's a pretty easy drive. They're on both ends of Orange County, so it should be too hard to get to. So I think now we're going to get into comically. So, Dom, I'm going to give you two comicallys. I mean, you have to give me two ratings. You have to give me the movie as on its own, and the movie for the MCU. Where would you rank it among the MCU movies?
Okay. As its own, I would probably say about an 8. 8 out of 10
okay.
comicallys.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
In the MCU, probably like a 9.2.
Interesting. Very, very exact.
Yeah, that's where it feels. That's where it feels for me. Because it was definitely a very important movie. It was very good. But it's, in regards to the MCU, it's lacking. Not lacking. Lacking isn't the right word. It didn't have the same type of thought put into it, I guess, as the later movies. And it wasn't as fleshed out, I guess.
Okay, I can understand that.
But I like it very much, so it's a high score.
No, I get you. Yeah, for me, I'm going to have to say, on a movie on its own, I'm going to have to go all the way to 9.
All right.
just because it also has a lot of importance to me. It's something that I got to see and enjoy with my mom, and so it's a great movie for me, and I just love it. And I think as far as the whole in the MCU, I'm gonna match it. I'm gonna match you. I'm gonna go with a 9.2. So we'll go with 9.2 comicallys as a whole, and I'm gonna have to move it to 9 for on its own. I just think it's so good, and knowing that there, for me personally, a few flops coming up in this series of reviews, it's going to go pretty high for me.
Yeah, those are going to be pretty fun.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back. Thank you so much for being here, and Dom, and thank you guys for listening. Ben is going to be gone for a few weeks, so we're going to be doing a few more weeks of this. Next week, we are doing The Incredible Hulk with one of my friends, Adam. So, guys, hopefully you get excited for that. And Dom, thank you so much for being here this week.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, all right. Well, you guys have a good week. Stay safe, and yeah, bye.
See you later.